Welcome to the deep dive. So, just a few weeks back, things looked pretty tense between India and Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
Missile launches, real escalation.
Yeah, worrying times.
And then, almost out of nowhere, a ceasefire. So today, we're going to try and dig into what's actually behind this apparent de-escalation.
Exactly. We're mainly looking at a recent Guardian article today, which focuses quite a bit on Indian Prime Minister Modi's statements after the ceasefire was announced.
Okay.
And our mission really is to kind of pull out the key takeaways from what he said, see what it tells us about, where things stand between these two nuclear-armed neighbors.
Right. Let's unpack that. So this Guardian piece zooms in on Modi's public comments.
Okay.
And one thing that, well, it immediately jumps out is how firm he sounds about India's military stance.
Mm-hmm.
He actually said India has only paused military action. Paused, not ended. That feels like a very, very deliberate word choice, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Paused versus ended. It's a huge difference.
Right.
Paused implies it's temporary, like they're ready to start again if something happens. Yeah.
It's a pretty clear signal that the root problems aren't solved, and India's keeping its options open. You wonder, what exactly are they waiting for? A specific move from Pakistan, or is it just about looking strong?
And he didn't stop there. He also said India will, and I quote, retaliate on its own terms if there are future attacks. And get this, that he's personally monitoring every step of Pakistan. I mean, that's incredibly assertive language, almost defiant, you could say.
It really is. It just doubles down on that idea that this isn't over, just interrupted, and that phrase on its own terms.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, it suggests they want complete control over how they respond next time. No outside influence, no set timelines maybe. It's projecting strategic autonomy. Makes you think how Pakistan and everyone else reads that message.
Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. A major point of difference. Modi, in his address, apparently made zero mention of the U.S. helping broker the ceasefire.
Right. Which is strange because, according to the Guardian report, President Trump and Pakistani officials gave credit to the U.S. Specifically, they named Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President Vance, saying they worked hard on the diplomacy side.
That silence from Modi is quite noticeable, isn't it? You have the U.S. and Pakistan saying one thing, highlighting American involvement.
And India saying nothing about it.
Exactly. It could be about projecting that image of, self-reliance, India handling its own security, not needing outside help, or perhaps not wanting to appear to need it.
Maybe for the audience back home.
Could be. Projecting strength domestically is often just as important as signaling internationally.
And not only did he not mention the U.S., Modi actually said the opposite. He claimed Pakistan started the ceasefire process. Said they reached out to India's head of military operations, and they were the ones seeking international help. That directly contradicts the story from Washington and Islamabad.
It's a classic case of conflicting narratives. Each side is trying to frame how this de-escalation happened to suit their own story. India's version makes them look strong, and Pakistan look like they needed rescuing, basically. This happens all the time in international politics, this narrative shaping. It affects public opinion, sets the tone for what comes next.
And looming over all of this, of course, is the nuclear aspect. That's always the scariest part. The article mentions Modi hinted at this during the escalation. He said India wouldn't tolerate nuclear blackmailing in any future conflict.
That's a very potent statement, given the context. Both sides have nuclear weapons, so saying you won't tolerate nuclear blackmailing is a strong deterrent message aimed squarely at Pakistan.
Yeah.
It says, don't think you can use the nuclear threat to pressure us. And, it subtly reminds everyone of India's own capabilities, too. These words carry immense weight.
And it lines up with what Trump reportedly claimed, that the U.S. intervention stopped a bad nuclear war.
A potential war that could have killed millions was the quote, I think.
Yeah, chilling stuff.
It really is. Whether a nuclear war was truly imminent is debatable, of course, but Trump's comment just underscores the catastrophic risk involved. Modi, talking about nuclear blackmailing, shows they're acutely aware of that danger, but their approach seems to be through strength, not backing down.
Okay, so let's shift to the actual ceasefire terms. The Guardian mentioned reports from Pakistani security officials, something about possible future talks.
Yeah, they suggested maybe meeting in a third country. The UAE was floated as a possibility, I think. A neutral ground for broader talks, perhaps.
But Modi's take was different.
Very different. He stated very clearly that if any talks do happen, they would only be about two things: terrorism and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
Right. And just for clarity, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, sometimes called Azad Kashmir by Pakistan, is the part of the former princely state that Pakistan administers. It's been a major point of friction for decades.
Thanks for adding that context. So yeah, you see the gap. Pakistan hinting at broader talks, maybe mediated. Modi drawing these really narrow lines, basically dictating the agenda. Terrorism and poke only.
That sounds like a very tough precondition.
It suggests a hardening of India's stance. Not much room for negotiation on other issues Pakistan might want to raise. Makes you question how likely successful talks are under those conditions.
But despite all this political posturing and the different narratives on the ground, things do seem calmer. The ceasefire itself, along the line of control, seems to be holding. Right. No reports of shelling resuming.
That seems to be the case, according to the article, and that's good news, obviously. In the short term, a stable ceasefire is crucial. It lowers the immediate risk and, creates at least a little bit of space for diplomacy, maybe.
It suggests both sides, whatever their rhetoric, do want to avoid things spiraling again right now.
Precisely.
And we're seeing actual de-escalation steps, too, like those airports in northern India that were shut down. They've reopened.
Right, 32 of them, the report said.
And military officials apparently agreed to reduce troop levels near the border. Plus, sending teams to defuse unexploded bombs, letting villagers return home. Those are practical signs of trying to get back to some normalcy.
Yeah, those are important confidence-building measures, especially locally. Getting civilian life back on track, pulling back troops slightly, it helps reduce the chance of accidental clashes and makes the situation feel a bit more stable, even if the big political issues are still there.
So, pulling all this together, we get the split-screen view. The U.S. and Pakistan emphasize America's role in the peace. India says, nope, Pakistan came to us. The fighting stopped for now, which is good, but the core issues, terrorism, Kashmir, they're clearly not resolved. Modi's conditions for talks really hammer that home.
Exactly. The different stories, Modi's very firm language, and it all points to this deep-seated mistrust and just fundamentally different ways of seeing the situation. So yes, the immediate crisis seems averted, but his talk of a pause and those strict conditions for talks, it suggests the underlying tension is very much alive.
He's basically saying, this pause might not last if things don't go India's way.
That seems to be the message.
Okay, so let's recap the main points here. First, India insists this is just a pause in military action, not an end. They're staying very assertive about retaliating on their own terms.
Right, key point.
Second, there's this major disagreement about how the ceasefire even happened. U.S. says they played a big role. India completely leaves that out and points the finger at Pakistan.
That narrative battle is significant.
And third, if talks happen at all, Modi says they'll only be about terrorism in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. A very narrow focus.
Yeah, those are the core takeaways. The mix of Modi's tough talk, the conflicting stories about the ceasefire, and the tight limits on any future dialogue. It paints a picture of a relationship that's still, incredibly complex and potentially quite volatile, despite the current quiet.
So given those really specific conditions for any future talks, and Modi being so clear this is just a pause, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What are the real chances for long-term stability here? And maybe more importantly, what could actually trigger a return to conflict even with this current calm? That's definitely something to keep watching. Thanks for walking us through this.
Absolutely. Lots to consider.